Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's seminar. Glad to have you with us. Welcome to all of you back of the house professionals. We're excited to have you take some of your time to be with us today. My name is Dirk Johnson. I am the Executive Director of the Vacational Housekeeping Professionals Association, and I am grateful for the opportunity to be with you. Just a couple of things to bring to your attention. VRHP was established in 1999, and our mission or objective is to help all of you be the best at housekeeping, maintenance, and laundry. And that is what we specialize in. We have a couple of upcoming events that I want to make you aware of. And those are, we have some future webinars taking place. Obviously, we have one today, and then we have one on September 12th. Getting ready for budget creation. We will have an accounting expert with us who can help us get ready to crunch those numbers and to have a successful budget for 2019. And then on September 19th, we have 4 simple steps for difficult conversations. I know many of us struggle with giving bad news or telling somebody where they need to improve, and so Dory Jean is going to come along and help us succeed at that. And then on the 19th of October, we will have a discussion about how data can help us succeed. We all have mounds of data sitting out there that can help provide us with a great picture of the work that we're doing. We also have a couple of one-day seminars that are taking place. We'll be on the East Coast in Orlando in October, and then in December we work our way across to Hawaii. So if you need a reason to visit Hawaii and to take a business trip of some sort, we would welcome you there to be with us. Otherwise, you can join us in the snowy mountains of Utah and Park City, or the snowy mountains of Colorado and Breckenridge. And if you're looking to improve your singing ability and want to get a record deal, you could certainly join us in Nashville. And so those are the locations we're going to be at, and if you want to attend any of those, you'll be able to register for those soon on the VRHP website. VRHP is also attending several user conferences this year. We'll be at the Summit for Streamline in September, and then the LiveRes Partner Conference in October. And we will also be doing certification testing at each one of those locations, so you can become a certified housekeeper, inspector, or maintenance tech, or laundry individual, whatever you would like. You can certainly take those tests there. And then the final conference that I want to bring to your attention is the National Conference held in Las Vegas, Nevada, October 28th through the 31st. This is the first time that VRHP and VRMA have combined. And so this will be a one-stop shop for all things front of the house and back of the house. VRHP has 2 tracks. We open up our tracks with our roundtable discussions, where we'll have about 15 to 20 different roundtable topics to discuss, and then we will conclude with a product demonstration or a show and tell of what worked, what didn't, and how things worked. So with that, we'll jump into our webinar today, SWOT analysis and other tools to help us improve. And before we jump into the nitty-gritty of what's taking place, I want to take us back to a time in history when Antarctica was unexplored and there was a race to get to the South Pole. And there were 2 people who were looking to win that race. One of those was Robert Falcon Scott, and the other was Roald Amundsen. And both of these gentlemen went about their excursion in 2 different ways. So Mr. Scott here, he packed up his belongings and had 1 thermometer, 1 ton of food for 17 men, and he marked his food and his supplies to return home with 1 flag. Whereas Mr. Amundsen, he took a different approach. He had multiple thermometers, 3 tons of food, and he marked his stashed food and supplies with multiple markers, multiple miles apart. That way, if they were a bit off track, they could find the stuff that their food and so forth, their provisions that they were looking for. And so as we fast forward a little bit and look at how each of these excursions ended, Mr. Scott and his team ultimately paid the ultimate price. They lost their lives. There was fatigue, hunger. Mr. Scott, he did the bare minimum. He hoped for ideal circumstances. As we know, in that particular part of the world, is never good. as well. And then looking at Mr. Edmondson, he read obsessively, prepared diligently, had multiple contingency plans, and as a result of his planning and foresight, his journey was relatively frictionless. So now as we start to look at our webinar today and start thinking about these two excursions, both of these men had a goal, and that goal was to get to be the first to the South Pole. And so we too must have goals. There's this great saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And that's what we need to do. We need to begin and decide what we're going to do and then take that first step. In my career as an executive housekeeper and as a manager, and as I've counseled and coached and worked with other executive housekeepers, I see many of them who are living in 2018 and working very feverishly to make 2018 a success. And so they make adjustments and make decisions so that 2019 or the following year can be a success. And one of my frustrations with myself and as I listened to this conversation was, well, what about 2020, 21, 22? What about all those subsequent years? No, we're just going to focus on this year because that's the goal and that's what we need to do. And so part of us as a management team and part of what we need to do is we need to not only look at 2018 and put out any fires there, but we also need to think ahead. What do I want my department, my goals to be in 2020? And as I have those long-reaching goals, and what that does is then that guides my decisions in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So then I have this long, continuous decision-making process as opposed to this flash in the pan, I'm going to fix it, and then 3 months later I have to go back and fix it again because I didn't have any long-range direction to work with. The other saying is, I can adjust my sails, but I can't adjust the wind. And so as the wind blows, we do need to adjust, and that's what the goals do. They provide that long direction for us to succeed so that we can have this continuation of work, because ultimately, as Mr. Stephen Covey said, we need to begin with the end in mind. And as we look at 2020 and what I want my departments to be, what I want my department to look like, what my goals for myself are, I need to make continuous decisions because I need to think about what I want to be when I finally get there. And then the last piece to this is we need to write the goals down. Even if all you do is write them down once and stick them in a drawer and never look at them again, the fact that you have written them down takes them from the dream world and puts them into the reality world that, hey, this is important enough for me to write down. And so I would encourage you to do that. Think about them, think hard, write them down, and then put that step forward and move down that path to making those goals become a realization. The next step to help us succeed in our endeavors is what I'll call the handy-dandy notebook. For those who have young children who know what Blue's Clues are, he's got his handy-dandy notebook with his big extra crayon there. And the objective for this handy-dandy notebook is so that we can write down not only where we succeeded, which is something we don't do frequently enough, but also where we failed or had challenges or need to make adjustments, and that we see all the time. And so, we need to have this notebook so we can make notes and write down and act as a remembrance. If you really want to have some fun with it, I came across these, daily disappointments, fresh rants, things that annoy me, just all these different things to take and make notes. For those of us that may not want to write down things, we can certainly, for the old school people, we could use a mini cassette recorder or a digital voice recorder. And then for those that have a digital device, you certainly could use one of these digital notebooks to be able to make notes and make observations. So what are we writing down? Well, we're writing down what we observed, what the issue was, what the repercussions were. Sometimes you need to draw a picture. Sometimes you need to take a picture. And if you're using one of these digital notebooks and you're using one of those digital devices, you can certainly shoot a video to help remind you what was taking place, because sometimes in the heat of the season we need to be a fireman, and that is we just jump in, fix the problem, and move on. And then we need to make some notes, because at a later time we will be able to sit down after the season and be able to reflect. And now what was that problem again? And if we didn't write it down, we won't be able to remember. And so each year just becomes, the definition of insanity, which is we do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. But by writing it down and by making notes, especially how you feel about it, what the repercussions were, then I can look at it and say, well, what about remember how you felt, and then be able to make those decisions and be able to move forward and find the answers and the solutions that you're after. Whether that's meeting with your boss to get a different set of resources, or meeting with your staff to say what's going on. I mean, you've got all these different things that you could certainly work with to do that. The key, though, is to capture in the moment all the information so you can remember what's taking place. So we move from goals to notebooks to another digital realm, which is data analysis. Now, in this data analysis, we have many things that we can work with. We can work with our guest or owner comment cards. We can track through that. There are many of us out there that are using apps or other pieces of software where we can track our back of the house work. Well, that's not helpful, is it? Look at that. I keep hitting my buttons, and all of a sudden I just go dark. Let's try that again, shall we? Here we go. Let's try this one more time and see what happens. Here we go. Back on track. Sorry about that, everyone. So as we're mining our data, we've got our housekeeping information here. I need to know are my clean times correct. So I want to check my actual clean time to my standard clean time. Did I start my back-to-backs on time? Were they completed on time? I need to know, how many hours of overtime did I have? On what day did I have them? What day was I short housekeepers? What was the number one day more housekeepers called out? So, I have all this information I can start to gather and look at to create a picture after the heat of the season to be able to take a look and see what's going on there. Maintenance is no different. I've got work orders per day. How many man hours did I have for the work orders? How many overtime hours did I have? And this is, the third item there is a huge one. Was I short-staffed because Joey called in sick, so I had to use a plumber to go and do some remedial tasks that Joey would have taken care of at a much lower rate. So, these types of things I need to be able to look at. And again, your software can be able to provide that information to you. Same thing on your laundry. How many pounds produced per day, per shift, per day, per week, per month? So you can start to track that and look at that. Look at the amount of ounces of product that was pumped into the machines. How many hours did the dryers run? You've got all this information to see and look at the productivity of your staff. So you're able to look at and get a picture of what's taking place as you're managing your departments. Now, I've talked about a lot of data pieces and a lot of different things that we can look at and know and understand. And I want to provide one piece of caution to you. It's called analysis paralysis. Because the information, the software, provides so much information to us that we can continue to overanalyze and think we could look at information for this past high season for 3 or 4 decades and still have questions as we try to dig through it. And so ultimately we just need to make a decision as we start to look at this data. And there's an executive coach named Jeff Boss, and he talks about this analysis paralysis, and he makes the following suggestions. Number one, set a drop dead date. I'm going to finish looking at the data on this date. Get a sanity check, whether that's with your boss, a coworker, or an employee, a subordinate, or something of that nature. Get a sanity check. I mean, I realize we all have to be crazy to work in the back of the house, housekeeping, maintenance, and laundry. Prerequisite for some of us and for some companies. At the same time, it's just, am I looking at this data right? Am I seeing it the correct way? The other question would be the other item is to curb your curiosity. Maybe not ask so many questions. Decide in advance, what am I looking for and how I want to look at that. And then as you're looking at your data, recognize that, there will always be issues with the data. There will always be questions. The moon, the stars, and the planets will never 100% align 100% of the time. And so you'll just have to work with what you have. And then the last thing he suggests is, stair-step the decisions. Make a little decision here, and if that works in your favor, then take the next step. And if that works in your favor, take the next step. So make them into smaller chunks so you're able to get the information and make the decisions that you're after. So as we transition from data, I want to circle back to us as individuals and talk about structured reflection. This is an item that I've done. It's written in a book by Michael Watkins called The First 90 Days. And this is something that I've done and that you would do at the conclusion of a work week, whatever that time frame is. And you're going to ask yourself specific questions. And so I've broken these out into smaller sections for you to see. And so the first part is part A, right? How do I feel? What am I looking at? Am I excited, confident? Do I feel in control of my success? And then you answer the questions of why not and what can be done about it. And so, really be honest with yourself as you look at this and think of ways to succeed and move forward as you look at how you feel. I understand that I am feeling illiterate in the feeling category because I need to be more in touch with those and be able to articulate those better. And so, as my wife would say, for sure. But find a way to do that. The second step is what's bothered you. Who did I fail to connect with? What about the meetings I attended? What about the things I've observed, seen, or heard? You start looking at these things to write this down. And that way you're able to get the snapshots of each time period to see what's taking place. And then you start looking at interactions and decisions and missed opportunities and what do you regret the most. Again, this is an opportunity for you as an individual to look at and do some self-evaluation to say, how am I feeling? Where am I at? What am I succeeding at? And what do I need to improve on? And then the final question in this section talks about the biggest challenges or difficulties that you are facing. And then I love what it says here in the parentheses. It says, even experienced and skilled people blame problems on the situation rather than their own actions. And so we become less productive and less proactive at this. And so sometimes we really have to take a good hard look at what we're doing to know and to see what's taking place. And then the second part to this is something that I call coaching questions. And, it talks about assertiveness, self-regard, and empathy. And have I applied them in the best way that I could have and should have? Again, as I said at the beginning of this section, we need to be honest with ourselves. And as you look at this and fill this out over time, and as you review them over time, you will be able to see for yourself and learn about you, about how you make decisions, about what struggles there are, and what repeating patterns are taking place based on the situations and circumstances. And you can learn so much about the self-discovery of who you are and what you struggle with and what you succeed with, so you can be better at your responsibilities, and your employment is just so critical to helping you succeed. So I would recommend you do something of this nature to look at what you have and how you can learn about yourself. So now that we've done all of that pieces, we're going to move into the penultimate step, which is SWOT, and that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so as a group, now you could obviously do this as an individual. Generally, it's done as a group. You're going to sit down and lay out what your strengths are, what your company does well, what your internal resources are, what the weaknesses of the company are or department are. What do we lack? What limited resources are we working with? And then you're going to look at opportunities. What undiscovered pieces can we do? I know most departments are lacking in money. So does an employee or someone have an idea for an extra source of income to come in and help us out and allow that money to be in the budget so we can do some of these other things we want to do? And then what about threats? The vacation rental industry has been turned upside down over the past couple of years, a couple of times. And so, what are those threats and how are we going to continue to be competitive? And discuss that and list those out. And I'm a fan of just a couple different colors of Sharpies, a big flip chart on the wall, and then you just start writing down. This is all about brainstorming, not necessarily about judging, and everybody throwing ideas up on the table and learning and listening and then feeding off of each other as you start to go through this. The analysis then comes out afterwards as you then start to look at this and fine tune it and figure out what really is there. And I loved how this laid it out, for your strengths, are internal and helpful, and your opportunities are external. What are you looking at? And And your weaknesses are internally, but they're harmful. And then your threats are external, but they're harmful. And so how do we look at life and how do we look at our department to be able to accomplish these things? Because the strengths we want to build, enhance, the weaknesses we want to resolve and reduce, the opportunities we want to exploit and expand, and the threats we want to avoid and thwart. And so we can then continue on and move forward. This is a great tool to get everybody together with and to have a great, sit around and have a small lunch and have people talk about it and just look at it and just gather people's information. As the leader of the department, just listen and dig. Ask follow-up questions. Help me understand what brought that to your mind. What caused that to be important to you to say that? So you can really begin to understand what's taking place. So now that we've talked about SWOT, the other item would be our focus group. We can certainly do a focus group with staff instead of doing a SWOT analysis. You could do your SWOT analysis with the leads in your department, and then you could get your staff together, your seasonal housekeepers or full-time housekeepers, and then start to look at, ask them, what are they pleased and proud of? Where did the company succeed? What could we be more effective at? Where did we fall short? What are the opportunities you see? And as we start to ask staff these questions, again, asking follow-up questions, help me understand, why did you say that? What did you see that made you think of that? Will allow us to see what they're seeing because, obviously as a manager, you're dealing with a lot of things, and the staff have a different perspective as they live with the decisions and the layout of what you're doing. And so getting that feedback is imperative to the success of the department. And then, you've got guests and owners, asking them the same questions. What do we want to do? Where do we want to be? What are we effective at? Where are we falling short? Now, obviously, for some, this has chills go down their spine as they think, what, I got to meet with an owner and ask them some of these questions? You don't do it with every owner. You pick and choose. Which owner do I feel is best? Which owner really, is going to give me some good feedback? Which guests have stayed with us for many, many years? Which ones are going to provide some good insight to us? Now, whether you meet them in person, whether you meet them over video phone, which would be in person is best, video phone is second, phone call is third, email is dead last. Because again, I want to be able to ask follow-up questions. Well, help me understand, what are we doing? Why is this important to you? Because if I'm not having this interaction with them, then that just doesn't work. And so, here we are. We've looked at all these different things that we have, right? We've got goals we need to have. We need to have our notebook so we can remember and write down things. We need to be looking at ourselves from structured reflection so we can learn about who we are, how and why we make the decisions we make, and what causes us stress and what helps us succeed. Data analysis, because certainly we've got a whole bunch of data out there we can look at to help us and understand what's taking place in our departments. Focus groups, SWOT analysis to help us look at and to know what we can do to do better from a group standpoint. And so that rounds out the items we have. What questions do you have that I can answer for you and help you succeed on this path of self-improvement and being better at what we do? So Ashley has typed in, and she's asking about the homeowners. She says, for the homeowners focus group, how many would you recommend? And I would do 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. Because they all have different opinions, and it may go longer than what you need to. Whether it's one-on-one or in a small group, that's what I would say and do. Not too large of a group. I wouldn't do it at an HOA meeting, that's for sure. They've already hot and contested and other things on the mind. So just a small group to get together and look at and be able to pull things together that way. All right. Well, it looks like there aren't any other questions. So I appreciate your time today. This is my contact information, my email, and my cell phone. So if you have any questions or anything else, you're happy to reach out to me, and I am grateful for your time. And I thank you for watching, and thanks for being a part of the webinar. Hope you have a great day.